What happens when you run out of belly fat? Imagine you haven't eaten in days, not hours, days, and something strange starts to happen. The hunger you expected to crush you, it quietly fades. Your thoughts become unusually sharp, almost electric. You feel lighter, calmer, more focused than you have in months. Your waistline is visibly shrinking, and somewhere deep inside your body, a biological revolution is unfolding at the cellular level, one that most people never even knew existed. But here's the question nobody talks about, the one that sits at the edge of all fasting conversations, whispered but never fully answered. What actually happens to your body when you run out of belly fat entirely? What does your body do next? And more importantly, is it dangerous, transformative, or both? That question is exactly what we're going to answer today, completely, honestly, and in a way that will permanently change how you see your own biology. This video isn't a simple weight loss tutorial. It's not about counting calories, following a diet trend, or repeating generic advice you've already heard 100 times. This is about the hidden survival machinery inside your body. The ancient, intelligent, almost miraculous system that activates the moment food stops coming in. We're talking about the hormonal negotiations happening between your organs, the moment your brain switches fuel sources, the reason some people feel absolutely euphoric during extended fasts, while others crash hard into exhaustion and chills. We're going to walk through every stage of this biological journey from the first hours of fasting all the way to the edge of what the human body can physically handle. And the truth waiting for you at the end of this video, it's something most people in the fasting world never talk about because they're too focused on the benefits to acknowledge the limits. Stay with us, because understanding both sides of this story could genuinely protect your health and optimize your life. Let's start at the very beginning, the moment you stop eating. Most people assume the body immediately panics when food stops arriving, but that's not what happens at all. Your body doesn't panic. It has been here before. Hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution, of feast and famine, of hunting seasons and dry spells have made your biology extraordinarily prepared for exactly this situation. The moment your last meal is digested and your blood sugar begins to dip, your body calls what you might imagine as an internal emergency meeting. Every system checks in, every organ gets its assignment, and the first move is calm, calculated, and surprisingly elegant. Your body reaches into its emergency fuel stash, a substance called glycogen, which is essentially compacted glucose stored in your liver and muscles. Think of glycogen as the cash in your wallet. It's fast, it's accessible, and it gets you through the short term without any drama. For the first 12 to 24 hours of fasting, glycogen is doing most of the heavy lifting. Your brain, your muscles, your organs, they're all running on this stored glucose, and life feels relatively normal. You might feel a little hungry, maybe slightly low on energy, but nothing alarming. The real shift happens when that glycogen supply starts running low, usually somewhere between 12 to 24 hours, depending on your activity level and metabolic rate. This is the moment your body makes a critical decision. It drops insulin, the hormone responsible for storing energy, to nearly zero. And with insulin out of the picture, fat cells receive a very clear biological signal. You are now free to release your stored energy. Fat cells across your body, but especially the visceral fat packed around your organs, begin unlocking and releasing fatty acids into the bloodstream. The liver picks these up and starts converting them into something remarkable: ketones. Ketones are small, clean energy molecules, and they are genuinely one of the most fascinating substances your body produces. If glucose is like fast-burning gasoline, powerful but messy, then ketones are more like a quiet, efficient electric motor. They burn steadily, they produce less oxidative waste, and your brain, interestingly enough, prefers them in many ways to glucose once it gets used to them. The liver essentially transforms into a biofuel factory at this point, running 24 hours a day to convert incoming fatty acids into ketone bodies, primarily one called beta-hydroxybutyrate, or BHB. Your brain, your heart, your muscles, they all start accepting this new fuel source. And for many people, this is the moment the fasting experience transforms completely. The sluggishness of the transition phase lifts, mental clarity arrives, energy stabilizes, cravings drop. You've entered what's known as metabolic switching, the point where your body officially shifts from being a sugar burner to a fat burner. Now, it would be dishonest to pretend this transition is entirely smooth. For a lot of people, the first 1 to 3 days of this shift feel genuinely unpleasant. There's a reason the fasting community calls it the keto flu, and it's a very real experience. As your body reprograms its entire energy infrastructure, switching fuel sources, recalibrating hormones, adjusting enzyme production, you might feel tired, irritable, headachy, or mentally foggy. Your muscles might ache slightly. You might feel cold. Some people feel nauseous. This is uncomfortable, no question about it. But here's the important thing to understand. This discomfort is not your body failing. It's your body upgrading. It's the biological equivalent of a factory shutting down one production line to retool and launch a superior one. The short-term disruption is the cost of a dramatically better system coming online. And once that system is fully operational, what you experience on the other side is genuinely worth understanding. Once you're fully in ketosis, deeply, stably running on fat-derived fuel, something extraordinary begins to happen in your body that goes far beyond just weight loss. Your visceral fat, that dangerous deep fat wrapped around your organs, begins to break down rapidly. And visceral fat is not like the fat you might pinch on your arms or thighs. It is biologically active, inflammatory, and metabolically destructive. It releases inflammatory chemicals called cytokines. It disrupts your hormones. It interferes with insulin signaling. It quietly raises your risk for heart disease, type 2 diabetes, cognitive decline, and even certain cancers. So when your body starts burning through this fat during extended fasting, it's not just reducing your waistline, it's dismantling one of the most harmful substances in your body molecule by molecule. This is why people who fast long enough often describe feeling fundamentally different, not just lighter, but genuinely healthier in ways they struggle to put into words. But here's where it gets even more interesting, and a little complicated. Visceral fat doesn't just store energy. Over years of unhealthy eating, chronic stress, and environmental exposure, visceral fat accumulates something else entirely. Toxins, old hormones, inflammatory compounds, and metabolic waste products that your body essentially sealed away in fat tissue because it had no better place to put them. When you begin burning visceral fat rapidly, all of that stored material gets released into your bloodstream at once. Your liver and immune system suddenly have a massive cleanup job on their hands. For some people, this process goes smoothly. They feel energized, light, mentally sharp, and almost euphoric. Their detox systems are keeping pace with the release. But for others, particularly those who carry more toxic load, this flood of released compounds overwhelms the system temporarily. That's where the headaches, the fatigue, the skin breakouts, and the waves of nausea come from. It's not your body breaking down, it's your body doing the deepest cleaning it's done in years. Let's talk about hunger, because what happens to appetite during this phase defies most people's expectations completely. Common logic says the longer you fast, the hungrier you get. But that's not what the science shows, and it's not what most experienced fasters report either. A Harvard study from 2017 found that beta-hydroxybutyrate, the primary ketone your liver produces, actively suppresses hunger by calming down the brain's appetite centers. It also increases GABA, a neurotransmitter associated with calmness, relaxation, and focused alertness. A 2019 Oxford University study went further, showing that when blood ketone levels reach between 1.5 and 3 millimoles, participants experienced up to a 60% reduction in hunger compared to their baseline. 60%. Not a slight dip, a dramatic, measurable suppression of appetite that frees the mind from the constant noise of food craving that most people live with every single day. This is why people deep in ketosis often forget to eat. The hunger simply isn't there. And the mental clarity that accompanies this stage is something that has fascinated researchers, philosophers, and spiritual practitioners for thousands of years. Ancient Greek philosophers fasted regularly, believing it sharpened their thinking. Buddhist monks have incorporated fasting into their practices for millennia. Japanese Zen traditions use fasting as a tool for mental purification.
Indigenous cultures across every continent have used periods of fasting as preparation for vision quests, ceremonies, and important decisions. They observed the same thing that modern neuroscience is now confirming. When the body runs on ketones, the brain enters a state of heightened clarity, calm alertness, and creative focus that is genuinely difficult to achieve any other way. The reason makes perfect evolutionary sense. If your ancestors were fasting because food was scarce, the last thing their bodies could afford was mental fog. They needed sharp thinking to find food, to problem solve, to survive. So evolution built a system that doesn't weaken the brain during fasting, it sharpens it. Now let's look at what happens to your brain specifically as visceral fat disappears, because this connection is one of the most underappreciated aspects of fat loss science. Visceral fat, as we mentioned, is constantly releasing inflammatory molecules into your bloodstream. And those molecules don't just circulate harmlessly, they cross the blood-brain barrier and directly interfere with brain function. Studies have linked high visceral fat to increased risk of cognitive decline, depression, anxiety, and poor concentration. People with high visceral fat often experience what researchers call metabolic brain fog, a persistent, low-grade cognitive impairment that they've lived with for so long they mistake it for their natural state. They think they're just not a morning person or not a detail-oriented thinker. In reality, their brain is working against a constant tide of inflammation that visceral fat is generating. When that fat starts to disappear, the inflammation drops, the fog lifts, and what remains is often startlingly different from what they've been used to. A Yale University study found that reducing visceral fat by just 10% resulted in measurable improvements in short-term memory, processing speed, and focused attention within 3 weeks. 3 weeks. That's how quickly the brain responds when you start removing its biggest biological enemy. Blood sugar stabilizes without the constant spikes and crashes that come from insulin resistance. The hippocampus, your brain's primary memory center, functions more efficiently without inflammatory interference. And with ketones now fueling the neurons directly, the brain has a clean, consistent energy source that doesn't produce the oxidative stress that glucose metabolism generates. Many people describe this stage as finally feeling like themselves again, mentally present, emotionally stable, and capable of the kind of sustained focus they remember having in their youth. It's not an exaggeration, and it's not placebo. It's documented, reproducible biology. Here's something else that surprises people during this stage. Your immune system begins a quiet but significant renovation. Under normal high-fat, high-sugar dietary conditions, chronic low-grade inflammation keeps the immune system in a state of constant low-level activation. It's like having your home's security alarm going off at a low volume all day, every day. Your immune cells are perpetually responding to signals from visceral fat, and this chronic activation wears the system down over time. When visceral fat begins to break down during extended fasting, that constant immune noise quiets. The body enters what some researchers call a state of immune recalibration. Old, dysfunctional immune cells are cleared out through a process called autophagy, essentially the body's cellular recycling program, and newer, more efficient immune cells can be produced in their place. This is one of the reasons why periodic fasting has shown promise in research on autoimmune conditions, cancer prevention, and longevity. The immune system, freed from chronic inflammation, can finally do its actual job. Now we arrive at the phase that most fasting content never reaches, the territory where fat reserves are running genuinely, critically low. And this is where the story changes tone entirely, because what happens here is not something to romanticize. When your visceral fat reserves are nearly depleted, your body doesn't simply continue business as usual at a lower fuel level. It activates what can only be described as a full biological emergency protocol. The first sign is temperature. You start feeling cold, not the mild chill of a cool room, but a deep, persistent coldness that doesn't respond to adding layers. That's because your body is deliberately reducing its metabolic rate to conserve whatever energy remains. Like a smartphone switching to low power mode when the battery hits 5%, your body begins shutting down non-essential functions, reducing heat production, slowing heart rate, and dimming every system that isn't absolutely critical for immediate survival. Leptin, the hormone responsible for telling your brain that your body has sufficient energy reserves, drops to nearly zero. And when your brain receives that signal, it interprets it not as "you've successfully lost weight," but as "we are in life-threatening starvation." Every ancient survival instinct activates simultaneously. Cortisol, the stress hormone, surges to mobilize whatever fuel is left. Your nervous system becomes hypervigilant, scanning for threats and resources. You feel edgy, anxious, and unable to relax, not because something is psychologically wrong, but because your biology is running its most ancient, primal emergency code. This is the survival operating system that kept your ancestors alive through famines, and it is extraordinarily powerful. But it was designed for short-term crises, not extended voluntary fasting, and when it runs for too long, the costs become very real.
This is the critical threshold that everyone who fasts needs to understand. When fat stores drop below approximately 5 to 7% of total body weight, the body makes a decision that is simultaneously brilliant and devastating. It begins breaking down muscle tissue to produce glucose for the brain. This process is called gluconeogenesis, the creation of new glucose from non-glucose sources. And when fat is no longer available, muscle protein becomes the primary raw material. Your body is essentially cannibalizing itself to keep your brain alive. And while that sounds dramatic, it is precisely what it is. Muscle isn't just cosmetic. Your skeletal muscles support posture, movement, and balance. Your cardiac muscle keeps your heart beating. Smooth muscle lines your digestive tract, your blood vessels, your lungs. When protein catabolism begins in earnest, no muscle tissue is entirely safe from the biological mandate to keep the brain powered and the heart beating at minimum function. The symptoms at this stage are distinct and unmistakable if you know what to look for. Movement becomes noticeably sluggish, as if your limbs are heavier than usual. Mental fog returns, not the transitional fog of early fasting, but a deeper, more pervasive cognitive impairment. Skin takes on a pale, slightly grayish tone, and paradoxically, hunger disappears almost entirely. But this disappearance is completely different from the ketone-driven appetite suppression of productive fasting. This isn't freedom from hunger, this is hormonal dysregulation. The hunger signaling system itself has shut down as part of a broader hormonal collapse. Hair begins to fall out. In women, menstrual cycles become irregular or stop entirely. Blood pressure drops. Reflexes slow. The body is rationing everything, and the margin for error is shrinking rapidly with every passing hour. The heart is perhaps the most alarming casualty of this stage. Research on individuals with extreme caloric restriction and anorexia nervosa, where the body reaches a similar state of fat depletion, has shown that the heart muscle itself can atrophy and lose mass. Cardiac output decreases. The rhythm of the heartbeat becomes irregular, a condition called arrhythmia that can, in extreme cases, be fatal. Studies published through the U.S. National Institutes of Health have confirmed that when fat stores fall below that critical 5 to 7% threshold, the body's attempt to fuel itself through muscle breakdown places the cardiac system under profound stress. The heart, which never gets a break, not for sleep, not for rest, not for a single second of your entire life, is suddenly being asked to keep working on diminishing structural resources. This is not a metaphor. This is a measurable, documented physiological risk. The immune system follows a similarly alarming trajectory at this stage.
Under normal fasting conditions, as we discussed, the immune system benefits from reduced inflammation and cellular renewal through autophagy. But past the point of fat depletion, when the body is cannibalizing muscle protein for fuel, the immune system loses its raw materials. White blood cells require protein to be produced. Antibodies are made of protein. Cytokines, the signaling molecules that coordinate immune responses, require metabolic energy to synthesize. When protein and energy are both being rationed for brain survival, immune production drops sharply. Your defenses weaken. Infections you would normally fight off in days can become serious. Wounds heal more slowly. The inflammatory repair process that normally protects and rebuilds tissues loses its momentum. The body that once used fasting to clean and optimize itself is now simply trying to survive the next 24 hours. This is why the most important thing anyone can understand about extended fasting isn't how to go longer. It's how to recognize when the biology shifts from beneficial to dangerous. The line between these two states is not arbitrary or overly cautious. It is drawn by decades of research, by documented physiological changes, by measurable hormonal thresholds, and it is crossed gradually with warning signs if you know what to look for. Persistent coldness that doesn't resolve, the return of foggy thinking after a clear period, unusual weakness or shakiness in the limbs, emotional flatness or a strangely absent sense of hunger, rapid heart rate or irregular heartbeat. These are your body's distress signals, and treating them as signs of success rather than warnings is one of the most dangerous mistakes a faster can make. Here's the deepest truth this entire biological journey reveals. Fasting is not a test of willpower. It's not a competition to see how long you can endure. It's not about proving something to yourself or to anyone else. Fasting is a biological tool, one of the most powerful tools available for metabolic health, cognitive enhancement, cellular renewal, and visceral fat reduction. But, like every powerful tool, it produces its best results when used with precision, knowledge, and clear boundaries. A scalpel in a skilled surgeon's hands saves lives. The same scalpel used without training or judgment causes irreversible harm. The difference between those two outcomes isn't the tool. It's the understanding of when to use it, how to use it, and crucially, when to stop. The beautiful arc of this entire story, from the first hours of glycogen burning through the extraordinary clarity of deep ketosis and the powerful dissolution of visceral fat, all the way to the biological emergency of fat depletion, tells you something profound about your body that no diet book or supplement company will ever frame this way. Your body is not your enemy. It is not lazy. It is not broken. It is an extraordinarily sophisticated survival machine that has been refined over hundreds of thousands of years to handle almost anything. It stores fat intelligently. It burns fat strategically. It protects the brain at all costs. It sends warnings before it reaches genuine danger. And it rewards knowledge with results that feel, to most people who experience them, genuinely life-changing. The problem is never the biology. The problem is misunderstanding the biology, pushing past the wisdom it's offering, or not understanding how to read the signals it's sending. So here's where we land, and this is the practical truth that ties everything together. If you're considering extended fasting, whether for metabolic health, cognitive clarity, fat loss, immune reset, or any of the other documented benefits, then the single most valuable thing you can invest in is not a longer fast. It's a deeper understanding of what's actually happening inside your body at every stage. Know that the first 24 hours are glycogen depletion, uncomfortable but essential. Know that the transition into ketosis is turbulent but transformative. Know that deep fat oxidation brings genuine clarity, reduced inflammation, and cellular renewal, but also brings a temporary storm of released toxins that require hydration, electrolyte support, and patience. Know that the signs of approaching fat depletion are your body's genuine distress signals, not milestones to celebrate. And know that stopping at the right time, refeeding intelligently, and giving your body the building blocks it needs to consolidate its gains is not weakness. It is, in every biological sense of the word, wisdom. Your body has been running this ancient, intelligent program for your entire life, waiting for the right conditions to activate its deepest cleaning, repairing, and optimizing functions. Fasting creates those conditions. Understanding fasting protects those conditions, and respecting the limits of fasting ensures that the version of you that emerges from the process is genuinely stronger, sharper, leaner, and healthier, not depleted, damaged, or diminished. That's the science. That's the story. And now that you understand it at this level, you're not just someone who fasts, you're someone who fasts with intelligence, with awareness, and with genuine respect for the extraordinary machine that carries you through every single day of your life. If this changed the way you see your body, consider subscribing, because this kind of science-based, depth-first content is exactly what we're here to create, and there is so much more of it on the way.